Thank you. Okay. Order, order. I will call Wendy Chamberlain to move the motion, and then I will call the Minister to respond. There will not be an opportunity for the member in charge to wind up, as is the convention, for 30-minute debates. Order, order. Wendy Chamberlain to move the motion.
Thank you. I beg to move that this House has considered universal credit and farmers. And Mrs Murray, it's a pleasure to serve under your chairpersonship. This morning for breakfast I had oat clusters, and for lunch I had a cheese panini with some salad. That's a good day, I remember to eat. But so far today, without even thinking about it, I've had produce from oat and wheat farmers, dairy farmers and a variety of vegetable farmers. And I suspect that everyone here could say something similar if they stopped to fill in a food diary. But it's true that farming is integral to our day-to-day lives. And whilst we're down here in Westminster, it might seem very far away without a field in sight. But my own constituency of North East Fife is rural and a constituency with a wide variety of agricultural businesses. And indeed, next month, the annual Fife Show will attract farming from across North East Fife and the surrounding areas and bring this community very visibly together. So it's therefore not surprising why I am here today talking about this particular issue, given the constituency that I represent. But even for those MPs representing urban constituencies, farming is quite literally the lifeblood of our very being. Without farmers, we do not have food. And I'm saying this to start off a debate on universal credit to drive home the very important point that we must not and cannot lose sight of the needs of our farmers, and we must do everything we can to support them. And surely that is what the government's Farm to Fork strategy is all about. But the state of our food supply chains means that for some farmers, they do need benefits in order to boost their incomes, and that in itself is deeply worrying. But that is a debate for another day and another department. But the fact is that some do need support, and that is why we are here today, to ask the Minister and the Department to design a system which works with and not against farmers. Happy to give way to the Honourable Member from Strangford.
The Honourable Lady always brings subject matters to Westminster Hall, indeed to the Chamber, which are of particular interest to me. And this is one. I declare an interest as a member of the Ulster Farmers Union. We own a farm down outside Grey Abbey, so I understand the issues and I understand the implications of what the Honourable Lady is saying. But does the Honourable Lady not agree that the fact that farmers may have 3 good months of income, which is not necessarily profit, followed by 9 months of hardship, means that the monthly system is not appropriate for the seasonal work? And that the work that, and rather than putting people off making farming viable, but that the necessary government aid through the universal credit system may make farming untenable for families, which is incredibly concerning in terms of national food security, because it's also about that, Madam Chair. It's about the food security, it's about delivering for the nation.
Thank you. And the Honourable Member for Strangford always gets in his interventions straight to the key issues. And indeed, I'm going to come on to talk about a number of the things that he references. And indeed, that monthly aspect to universal credit is one of the key challenges. But let's start at the basic point. The government is currently asking the vast majority of farmers to go through the process of transitioning to universal credit from tax credits now, right in the middle of peak farming months. It's, for example, the middle of lambing season, for instance. Let's be blunt, sheep farmers do not currently have time at the moment to be sorting through accounts, visiting the job centre, or to be having interviews by phone. And I think we would all recognise that farming is not a 9-to-5 job where appointments can be scheduled. The sheep 3 years fields down having a difficult birth isn't going to be able to hold on just because the job centre is due to call. And the farmer who not only cares deeply for their animals, but also can't afford to lose income if things go wrong, is not going to be able to stay in the farmhouse to wait for that call. They will be down in the field with the sheep to keep an eye on things and to intervene if need be. And Mrs Murray, even if there is a phone signal, which isn't always guaranteed, a farmer can hardly talk through the viability of his or her business whilst elbow deep in that sheep. Now, I appreciate that sounds slightly comical, but it is deeply frustrating for farmers and incredibly stressful when they are worried about losing their income. And it does, to me, show a failure within the DWP system to understand how farming works at all. I do want to ask the Minister to respond about what thought and consideration was given about farmers when the decision to roll out the transition to universal credit was made. Because I know that the National Farmers Union raised concerns about the transition as early as 2018 in evidence to the Work and Pensions Select Committee. Did the government pay any attention to that? Because even if they are talking to the NFU, I can't see the outcome in these policy decisions. Now, I recently tabled a written question asking if an impact assessment on the rollout of universal credits to farmers has been done. Now, the response, I'll be honest, didn't exactly answer the question, so I'm going to make the assumption the answer is wrong. But if I'm wrong, I'm happy to be corrected on that, and I hope the Minister will use her time to set out the findings from that assessment. But what the response I received did do was point me to the latest findings on the move to universal credit. And in this, there was only one paragraph relevant to farmers, and that was an observation that additional checks on self-employed claimants may be a factor in the low take-up of universal credit. I mean, obviously that's a part of it, but it does somewhat understate the issue, and it also conflates all self-employment businesses when farming is very different from somebody, say, running a shop, selling handmade products, or a tradesperson such as a joiner. So here we are. I'm going to assume that the Minister has heard the warnings from the NFU, has seen correspondence from MPs, has spoken to farmers herself, has had her officials carry out research into the farming industry, and has seen the media coverage on the radio, specialist farming news and print media. But I'm going to explain why universal credit fails farmers. Universal credit does not account for variable incomes and does not allow for those incomes to be averaged out. And the very nature of farming means that farming income varies significantly through the year or even over multiple years. Going back to that sheep farmer busy saving their animals and bringing new ones into the world rather than speaking to a work coach, that lamb won't be ready for sale until much later in the year. Meanwhile, the sheep and the lamb will require food, shelter, water, shearing and possibly extra hands on the farm to help out in the busy months. And an arable farmer might, in some cases, try their hardest to grow crops to be harvested in each season, but often this isn't practical. Not all areas are suitable for all produce, and even if you could, economies of scale means it can be more profitable to specialise. And that doesn't mean there is no work needing done until harvest and sale time, just that the work that farmers do doesn't get paid for many, many months. And meanwhile, seed, fertiliser and fuel costs are all going up. And this arguably is one of the reasons why some farmers do need extra support in the first instance.
Would the Honourable Lady allow?
I'm happy to give way to the right honourable member.
I'm grateful to the Honourable Lady for giving way because, like her, I've too had correspondence with the Government on this. The sheep farmer example is a very good one. That sheep farmer will have income possibly in the autumn from the sale of the sheep, possibly from basic payment and possibly from something like LFAS. There might be a small wool check sometime late summer, early autumn. But apart from that, that's the income that comes. That then has to be spread and harvested throughout the rest of the year. That's the reality for the sheep farmers to which the Honourable Lady refers. And it just shows the virtual impossibility of shoehorning that into a universal credit scheme that looks at things on a monthly basis.
I'm grateful to Right Honourable Member, and I think what he has illustrated is part of the challenge here, because what we are finding is when that income spike does happen, that is the very point where farmers are then losing the benefit to which they should be entitled to. I think it's important to recognise, Mrs Murray, that sometimes it does all go wrong. A really bad harvest, illness amongst livestock, a year of barely breaking even or worse. But otherwise, in the main, hopefully all that hard work and waiting pays off and payments come in. After months of very little, a significant income boost. And a boost which, as I've just said, will write off universal credit for that month, even though that income boost will have to stretch over the many months until the next sale day. Now, tax credits allowed farmers to average out their income over a multiple-year cycle to truly reflect what their monthly income was over time. Universal credit only takes a one-month snapshot, and I know that there are people that have experienced difficulties with universal credit in other occupations such as farming for that very reason. Given work coaches are required to assess if self-employment is gainful, there is a significant risk of months of loss being seen as not real work. Indeed, recently, a headline in The Telegraph stated that farmers claiming benefits told their farms are hobbies and to get jobs on this very issue. Some work coaches might understand how farming works, but it's clear that others certainly won't and don't. It cannot be left to luck. Now, I doubt the department has spare funds to train all work coaches in farming practices, so a standard reform of how income is assessed would surely be a much fairer and efficient path to take. Another related issue that I want to highlight, Mrs Murray, is the imposition of the minimum income floor after the 12-month transition period. I fully accept that there must be measures to stop people being able to potentially manipulate benefits to prop up an unsustainable small or hobby business. Applying a deemed minimum income when calculating universal credit does work in these cases, but I seriously question why it is useful to take vital income support away from farming families in those months where their produce is being produced rather than sold. Because farmers aren't earning the minimum wage in those months, so why on earth are we pretending that they do? The 12-month transition period is of course welcome, but the nature of farming isn't going to change in the course of a year. All this is arguably doing is pushing this problem down the road. So I really do urge the Minister to go away and review this. If she is genuinely concerned about farmers exploiting universal credit, there must be other anti-abuse provisions that we could be looking at. But the minimum income floor is a blunt tool which is doing more harm than good. My final point is similar to my first, because after the administrative burden of applying to universal credit, farmers must continue providing monthly income updates. Now, farmers are not accountants. They often operate in partnerships, and most importantly, they work full-time doing the actual farming, and their definition of full-time is different from others. And because by full-time I mean well over 12 hours per day, 7 days per week. When exactly does the Minister think that farmers will have the time to meet these obligations? So I do want to ask the Minister to not just repeat the same platitudes which have been signed off and sent in a standard letter, which I know I have received, I know the Right Honourable Member has received, and I've certainly seen it shared online many times, and I can assure her that it is doing nothing to reassure anyone. The good news for the Minister is that she only needs to look back to the tax credit system to find out what works. She does not need to reinvent the wheel. What farmers need is a system which allows for averaging income over multiple months and years, where benefits are paid during income spikes and where there is no assumed minimum income when it is low, without the administrative burden of monthly appointments and paperwork, and just simply with an understanding of how farming works and the variety of farming setups, whether it be tenant farmers or those in partnership and everything in between. And I should also say that it's not just farmers saying this. I've got an example here from a rural land and property agent who on their blogs has published a blog entitled "Why the Universal Credit System Isn't Working for Farmers." The Farming Forum thread on the change has currently 9 pages of comments on one thread and another has 24. There is a Facebook support group for farming families which has been deliberately kept open so that MPs, journalists and others can see what farmers are saying about this change. Yesterday, someone anonymously posted that because their family were so busy on the farm, they couldn't get to the job centre and their benefits have been stopped. The writer went on to say in their own words that they wanted to chuck themselves off a bridge as a result. Just a few days before that, someone wrote that they were able to feed their children, but they couldn't afford to eat themselves that day. They used to get £700 in tax credits a month, but the assessment for universal credit doesn't take into account the difference between income paid to the family and income used to meet farming bills. What this means, Mrs Murray, is because of this system change, someone who is producing our food cannot afford to eat themselves. This just isn't okay. Farmers are literally the reason why we're here with full stomachs right now, why our children have the energy to go to school and learn, why we can go to the supermarket and make our dinners tonight, why our restaurants are some of the best in the world. This is not an issue that is going to go away. It is a crisis for too many farming families. We must support them, and I hope that the Minister's response recognises the gravity of this situation. Thank you.
The question is that this House has considered universal credit on farmers. Minister Joe Churchill.
Thank you very much indeed, Madam Chairman, and it's a pleasure to serve under you. Before I respond, I'd like to pay tribute to Lord Field, whose passing was announced earlier today. He was a wonderful individual and contributed over many decades to the important issue of welfare. My own personal memories are of his kindness and compassion during my early days here. And as a former Work and Pensions Committee Chair, I know he would have taken great interest in all the activity that is happening across the House on welfare issues, not only this week, but over the recent past. Moving to the debate, I would like to congratulate the Honourable Member for North East Fife for securing this debate. I would firstly like to put on record that the government recognises the vital contribution of farmers to the country and to the economy as a whole. It is worth the most enormous amount to us, both not only in the growing sector but also in the manufacturing sector. From my own early days as a young farmer right through to representing a rural community, I am more than embedded and understand the challenges. And she will know, as I do, that as with many business areas and sectors, these businesses come in a multitude of different forms. And whilst I appreciate what she said about her own farmers lambing, my own farmers are trying, after the most appalling rainfall, to actually get seeds in the ground. But very gently, they are not the only businesses out there that deal with fluctuating incomes or transitions throughout their year, or are dealing with lives where they are putting in 12-hour days. We are working with them, and I would agree with her that that point is an important one. For clarity, I met with the representatives from the National Farmers Union on the 19th of March, and I'm really grateful to them. As soon as this issue was flagged to me, I reached directly out to them, and they responded, and we had the meeting. And it was to discuss this very issue of the migration of those in the farming community from tax credits to universal credit. I cannot answer the specifics that she brought up, but I am interested because the tax credit migration notices have only just gone out, so I am very confused why there would have been those stories. Perhaps if I could be facilitated with those individual challenges, I can make sure they are addressed swiftly. Now, officials in my department are continuing this engagement to ensure that farming communities are clearly communicated with and the transition to universal credit is as smooth as possible and those concerns are heard. At official level, I have had meetings take place on the 9th and 10th of April with officials from my department and the NFU. Engagement's been constructive and actions include sharing the move to UC third-party information pack with the NFU, who will share it with farming charities. And this pack supports the welfare rights organisations and charities to understand the process of making claims and what support is available. The NFU promoting the move to UC activity to the farming community via their regular communication channels, working with the NFU to produce a product for work coaches explaining the farming sector, because I too don't like that particular term, inviting the NFU external affairs team to monthly UC forum stakeholders. I also have asked whether it's possible that we have somebody with the right expertise at our county shows, as they are throughout the country, to have a session either in the NFU tent, the CLA tent, or wherever is appropriate, so people can have those discrete conversations where they are most likely to be facilitated. The department is providing this support, including assistance when making a claim for universal credit to those who need it. And this also includes, and this is really important, comprehensive transitional protection if eligible. Transitional protection is an extra payment in a customer's UC award, ensuring their entitlement is not lower than that they would have received on tax credits at the point of movement. Transitional protection is there to smooth the change, and it's why individuals should fill in the migration notice when they get it. Importantly, self-employed customers are also exempt from the application of the minimum income floor for a 12-month period, providing a significant period of time in order that the adjustment to UC can take place. So it's vital that when the migration notices are received, that customers take action so they don't miss out on those important transitional protections that we are trying to do to make sure that, a worried customer, and today we're talking about farming, but it could come from various other sectors, are helped and managed through the migration. When I discussed this with the NFU in March, they understood the need to avoid delay and indicated they stood ready to support individuals and ensure they engage. Of course.
I'm grateful to the Minister for giving way, because I'm sure we can all play a role in ensuring that this transitional relief is understood and the importance of returning the forum, and doubtless the NFU and others will do that too. The difficulty I have, though, is that even at the end of that transitional period, I don't see what in the farming business model is going to have changed. You're still going to have self-employed people with income coming in significant sums, but at small points in the year. So at the end of the transition, we're still going to be where we are today. That's not going to change. If there's going to be change, it has to come from the UC system.
So I thank the Right Honourable Member for Orkney and Shetland for those comments, and if he'll allow me, I'll come on to those. But I would also gently say he comes from a very tourist-driven area, and those incomes for those individuals fluctuate, and we expect them to have moved over to the universal credit system. With regards to self-employment, universal credit addresses a number of flaws with the tax credit system, and the government stands by these reforms, which were first introduced in 2013. To give context, previously self-employed individuals have been able to report very low earnings from their business activity whilst receiving much of their income from tax credits. And this can act as a disincentive to grow a business or look elsewhere for employment if a business is not viable. And all of us know in this room that businesses vary as far as their viability is concerned. A situation that is arguably not fair to the taxpayer and risks trapping individuals into low-earning self-employment and thereby, in some instances, more of a dependency on the welfare system. All customers moving to universal credit, including farmers, are asked and expected to attend a one-off meeting with a work coach to confirm their employment status. This means confirming that farming is their main employment, that it's regular, organised, developed and trying to make a profit. Not that it has to, but that it is their main job. I am sure my honourable friend would not disagree with this approach as it is focused on fairness. But we do consider each claimant's circumstances individually, and farmers are no different, and they are most likely to be considered gainfully self-employed for the exact reasons she laid out. They have livestock, they have to be there every single day, or they have crops to grow, etc. Therefore, they will be free to work on their business with no expectation to look for other work or take it up whilst in receipt of universal credit. During a farmer's first year in receipt of the new benefit, they might be expected to meet with their work coach up to 4 times more, but to minimise this, multiple appointment channels are available, which I have assured, including digital. So it might just be a short meeting over Teams. Well, that isn't, with all due respect, any more onerous than them engaging with a feed supplier or with their accountants. After 12 months, the minimum income floor is applied and no further work coach interactions are required if an individual or household circumstances stay the same. So again, once established, and that's what the transition period is about, that stability is carried through. I know that the concerns have been expressed about the impacts on farmers through the way their earnings are reported and the administrative burden that this might cause. But I'd like to reassure my honourable and right honourable friends that my officials are working with the NFU to better understand whether this challenge is actually one that they are worrying about in anticipation of, or whether there are things we can do to assist. This includes the NFU's attendance at monthly stakeholder engagement sessions and us offering to speak at NFU events, because it isn't to anyone's benefit to have people worried in this situation. Universal credit seeks to take earnings into account in a way that's fair and transparent and consider in the assessment period they are received with a Customers Award adjusted accordingly. This does mean that individuals are required to report their earnings more frequently than tax credits and in a slightly different way. However, the system has been designed to be simple and straightforward, with customers only needing to provide the total income from receipts into the business and high-level details of payments out during the assessment period. Whilst we are here today debating universal credit and farmers, I would gently say that the farming community, as I alluded to earlier, aren't the only profession that experience these large monthly fluctuations, with retail and tourism also being so. And I'm sure my honourable friend agrees that it's important that we work with our farmers, vital as they are to many of us and to all of us with the food they put on our plate, to alleviate the concerns, overcome barriers and help with the transition to UC. Assessing earnings monthly rather than annually may have a greater impact on all self-employed people with large monthly fluctuations, but steps have been taken to account for this. Where a self-employed customer reports a loss, the value of the loss is carried forward, taken into account when assessing earnings in future assessment periods. And similarly, when customers experience a spike in their earnings, only earnings that have exceeded £2,500 more than the amount they would normally receive reduce their universal credit award to zero, would be carried forward to affect a future assessment period. Universal credit is a broad system of support that takes account of all individual household circumstances. I'm a little concerned that the assumption today is that every engagement a farmer might have with the Department for Work and Pensions would be a negative one. That isn't the case. Where additional help is available, for example, with childcare or other assistance, individuals will be signposted to that support that they are eligible for, but they may well not have had an awareness of it prior to making their claim. Finally, I would like to put on record my thanks to the NFU. They swiftly engaged with us when asked. They were honest and forthright about the challenges. They've stepped up to working with us, and I hope that we can work together to assist the broader farming community, which is hugely important to the nation. And with them, I would strongly encourage people to engage with their migration notice so they can access the support and income protection as we make the move to universal credit.
It was remiss of me in the course of intervening in this debate not to remind the House of my entry in the Register of Members' Interests. I wonder if you might allow me now to do so on the record.
Absolutely. The question is that this House has considered universal credit and farmers. As many as are of that opinion say aye. Aye. To the contrary, no. The ayes have it. The ayes have it. Order. Order. The House will now suspend until 4:30 p.m.